Looking back, I have to confess that signing the application to enter into priestly formation did not mean that I knew in every detail what was coming next. And as late as yesterday, I still routinely am challenged by the many occasions or varieties of adversity that come as a part of being a follower of Christ. Now, I'm going to give you a pretty silly example because the big examples are real tear-jerkers. But just about a month or so after I met with Bishop Campbell and he approved my application to enter into priestly formation, I got a rather lengthy list of things that the seminary was asking me to provide. One of the things that the seminary was asking me to provide was my shot record. My shot record? Well, what am I, in kindergarten? And I just wanted to say, look, I don't have my shot record. And anybody who ever did have my shot record is no longer residing on earth. So I don't really know what to do here. And so we'll just say, for the sake of time, that I found myself going to my doctor and saying, well, you know, all of those childhood vaccinations that I'm supposed to have, I need all of them. And I remember sitting there on that, on that paper-covered table, and the nurse came in with a little metal tray with a bunch of syringes on it, and I tensed up. All right, that 5-year-old in me was like, oh no, I'm going to be harpooned again. And it only got worse when she reached over and moved my sleeve up. I'm like, oh no, here it comes. And then she wiped me with the alcohol wipe, and I'm like, oh no, now we're really close. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and finally I said, well, are we going to do this or not? And she said, we're already done. I was like, what? She goes, yeah, I already gave you the shots. I said, I didn't feel a thing. And she said, well, we're done. You got them. And I said, well, now wait a minute. Have the needles changed since I was 5? Or has my tolerance of pain just gone way up? And she said, well, probably a little bit of both. And so it was a helpful insight to me to realize a few very key points about Christian discipleship. Number one, you never know what's coming next. Number two, very often, when things do come, you have a whole variety of choices as to how you respond. You might say, well, I'm not doing that. I could have said, well, the shot record request is ridiculous, and so just forget the whole thing. Or we might say, well, okay, I'll do it, but I have a better plan. And in fact, I wrestled with that for many years in my life. I thought, well, I know God has a plan, but you know what, God? I think I have an even better plan. And if you really are as good as you say you are, and as loving as you say you are, and as powerful as you say you are, well, just use your goodness and power to make my plan work out. And it took me years to realize that every single time we do that, God just says, fine, I'll wait. Because God does indeed wait for us to come to Him with sufficiently sincere and sufficiently contrite hearts to say, Lord, I'm ready to let go of my ridiculously distorted understanding of myself and my very poor motivations for anticipating what comes next. Clearly, in today's gospel, Peter wrestled with the same thing. Why should I listen to a carpenter from Nazareth, of all places, and he's telling me how to fish? And when Peter finally has the simplicity and the purity and the humility and the sincerity of heart to not only hear Jesus tell him what's coming next, but to follow and to obey without reserve. And so, you guys know that I love this time in the church, this little scoop of ordinary time between the end of Christmas and Ash Wednesday. Because this is the time to be brutally honest with ourselves about our willingness to hear and to know and to pursue the will of God in our lives. And to resolve, maybe not on a permanent basis, let's just start with, 6 weeks of real change in our lives. To understand with greater clarity where I may have in either a very, very small way or in a very large way outright rejected God's will for my life. Or where have I tried to enter into negotiations with God about the work or the activity or the relationships that would compose my life? Because you see, again, God's not ignorant or mystified by what's coming next for you. God knows exactly what needs to happen for you in order to, what is God's ultimate hope for you? To become a saint. And God is at work in your life right here, right now, to do exactly that. And again, as we know from today's gospel, or certainly from the call of Isaiah, it is not always a happy, comfortable, joyous event. God often uses great adversity in our lives specifically for the purpose of making us the saint that He created us to be. But when and only when we enter into full cooperation with that, no matter what it means regarding the impact to the work that we do, no matter the impact to the activities that we undertake, and most especially regardless of the impact that it may have on our many good human relationships, we not only are willing to accept what God has in store for us, but we are tremendously grateful to receive it. Think of it this way. You ever crack an egg? Right. You ever crack a walnut? Sure. What happens if you try to crack an egg like you crack a walnut? You get a huge mess. What happens if you try to crack a walnut like you crack an egg? You go hungry. And God works in the same way. God cracks you like an egg when it's time to crack you like an egg. God cracks you like a walnut when it's time to crack you like a walnut. And God always waits for your conscious, active, willing participation in exactly what He has in store. So stop trying to control what you in fact have no control over. And stop being driven by what may be even the very natural human feelings that are associated with that. And without denying the reality of what is happening in your life, because God would never damage your dignity by denying the reality of what is happening to you. And God would never damage your integrity as a person by telling you that your feelings are not relevant. But at the same time, God is saying, do not be driven by the events of your life. Do not be driven by the emotions that may be attached to the events of your life. But in and through all things, look up. And to say, Lord, whatever the world brings me today, and no matter how I feel about the world brings me today, Lord, let it be for the honor and glory of your name and nothing else. And that is why it is such a privileged time right here, right now, because we can begin to contemplate these things. To ask in sincerity, Lord, help me again to understand the work and the activity and the relationships that you will bless in my life. Lord, grant me the courage and the strength and the wisdom to let everything else go, no matter what it may cost me, and no matter how I might feel about whether this is a good thing or a bad thing or a pleasant thing or an unpleasant thing or a planned thing or a complete surprise. Lots of people say, well, I'll give up chocolate. Well, seriously, if chocolate is the cause of you becoming disengaged with God and His will in your life, then absolutely give up chocolate. Or television, or social media, or alcohol, or whatever. But something tells me that that sacrifice, if that's the one you choose, is just a fig leaf for the real sacrifice that needs to be made in your life in order that you might emerge at the solemnity of the resurrection of our Lord, renewed in confidence that you really are becoming the saint that God created you to be. And that is my prayer for all of us. Not to say that we're going to all go out and, fall on a sword so that we might experience great adversity. And I can't really say for you whether that Lenten commitment will be something really small or something really big in your life. But my prayer for you is that it will become a real transformation for you, so that you might emerge into the great celebration of Easter, a clearer and stronger and more confident witness to the power and the grace and the mercy and the love of the eternal high priest of the new covenant.